I'm going to show you how to set up our typography project on Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how to use the text tool. So the first thing we have to do for this project is a little bit different than usual. We're going to actually open up a Google Doc and create our text so that we can copy and paste it into Photoshop. Now, I already made a few decisions. I wanted to make this a visual for you. So I decided first on the food that I'm going to use. I'm going to do an ice cream cone. I decided on which words I want to use. You can either repeat the same word over and over again. You can use 2 or 3 words, but I decided to use a few more than that. Your words have to do with your food to be related, and they have to be spelled correctly. So please check for spelling. I also decided on capitals. I wanted to make the first letter of every word capitalized to give my final drawing some variation. I also wanted to take out all of the spaces to give my final drawing a little bit more cleanliness because there won't be spaces everywhere, but that's a choice that you can make if you want spaces. And I also decided to put an exclamation point after each word to give it some repetition. So these are all choices you will make based on your visual preferences. Now that I have all of my words, I'm copying and pasting and just adding more copies of those 7 words. Now that I have a bunch, I'm going to copy and paste the whole paragraph, and that's what will be pasted into my Photoshop lines. Now make sure you keep this document in case you need it for next class, and just label it something that you can find next class with all of your other documents for school. Okay, let's get into Photoshop. Now I'm opening up and I grabbed this image right from Google Images. If I'm working on the desktop, I would normally click it and drag it over to the desktop and then click it and drag it back like we've been usually doing. But since I am on my laptop, I can just open, File, Open, or Control O, and I find my file that I saved and I open it up. This is another ice cream cone that I was deciding between. So I have this one. I will make a new layer and I can start drawing. Now before I get into my drawing, I want to show you some just basic shapes with the text tool. So if I have a rectangle, let's start with a rectangle. I'm going to make a big rectangle. And I'm going to grab my text tool. When you hover, the text tool will show one of 3 things. If it shows the cursor with the square in it like that, that means it will create a straight across horizontal line. And it actually didn't even recognize that there was a shape there, so it will do that no matter what shape is around it. If, though, you hover and it shows the cursor with the circle, that means it will fill the shape. So when I click, it fills the shape, and then I'm going to paste my text in, and that's the same text that I had before, and it fills it. I'm going to go back. Oops, not that far back. Let me get my rectangle back. If I hover and it shows the cursor with the squiggle line, like that, that's what we want primarily for this project. You can fill it later with the shape tool, with the circle to fill the shape, but let's start with text along the path. So when it has the squiggle line, that means that the text is going to follow the path of that blue line. So when I click, it automatically goes all the way around the rectangle. I'm going to paste in my text instead of this default text that's in a different language. And when I paste it, it's long enough that it fills the entire rectangle. I'm just going to click off of that so you can see it without the line. And I didn't have the stroke of my rectangle on, so there's no other line, and it looks nice and clean, and it's just my text. Now I can take this and with the normal selection tool up here, the move tool, I should say. I can make it smaller, I can turn it, just like any shape. So we're treating it like a shape now, even though it is filled with text. Okay, I'm going to delete that. One other note that I want to share with you is every single time you make a text, it will create a different layer. So I made this one earlier just to test it out, and it created another layer. I also made this one, it created another layer. So just be mindful of those layers. And if you want to group them together, you can always select the layers with holding shift, select all the layers you want to group, go up to layer and group. You can always ungroup layers later. If you want to merge them, you can merge them, but you can never unmerge them unless it's the last thing you did and it was a mistake. If you do a bunch of other actions, you can't go back and unmerge a layer later. Okay, moving on, our pen tool. I know some of us don't love the pen tool because it is tricky, but we're getting used to it. So here's some options. We have our normal pen tool, we have our freeform pen tool, which you can just draw with, and it creates that path for you. Or you have the curvature pen tool, which creates, oh, it's gonna continue my path, but it creates the curves and then you can move it later. Okay, so all of these pen tool options are in the same spot right here for you. Now that I have my path, and I know it's kind of a wonky path, I'm just going to reselect that path. So this is the path selection tool again. This little black arrow is just selecting the path that you created from the pen tool. So if you ever get off of that pen tool and you don't see those anchor points, go back and reselect that path so you make sure that you are using the path that you just drew. Okay, now let's go back to our text tool. I'm hovering until I see the wavy line, and I'm going to the beginning point of my path. I'm not going to start in the middle, I'm going to start at the beginning point of my path. Click, fill it with my text, and it fills the entire thing from the start of that line all the way to the end of that line. Okay, if you want to change the font or the size or the color of your text, you can do that as well. So we're going to either select all of it, which is kind of tricky with a wavy line like this. You can select all of it and change the font up here. You can change the color right here. You can change the actual bold or italic, and then the font, just like a document right here. I would suggest changing your font size and your actual font before filling it. So if we go back and you have this path, since we have so much text in that copy and pasted paragraph, it's hard to change all of the text together. And if I want to just make it 1 point smaller, it might be hard to find all of the text and make it 1 point smaller. So make sure you do that before you fill it. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to change the color as an example, and let's change the font. Just make sure it works. And we can also make it a little bit smaller here. Okay, I'm going to go back to the beginning of that line, fill it, see if that works. And there it is. That's probably a little bit too small. Let me zoom in and see if I can see the words. Perfect. Beautiful. All right. So then when I go back into my ice cream, what I did was I just started going around the cone here and going around the ice cream up here. But I realized that I want to make the font the exact color of my background. So this, again, this is a separate layer from my image. Make sure it's a separate layer so that it's not stuck together. Going back up here, I'm going on this layer, and I can merge them later if I have too many layers. And I have my freeform pen tool, and I'm just going to go around and create a line around the ice cream here. And I'll go across and make it closed. Before I fill it, I want to make sure it's this color. So I'm grabbing my eyedropper tool, finding the color that I want, going back to the text, my line is still there, and I fill it with my text. I think it's no, it is there. It's just really light, so I'm going to change that color. Just wanted to make sure it worked for you guys. Okay, so it did work. It's just a little bit too light, so I'll go back and I'll change that. And that's how we get started. I'll see if there's anything else I need.